The negative energy plane, also known as the plane of death, is a place of darkness, void, and death, where all matter is annihilated, where all life is drained completely. While most of the inner planes are hostile to life, the negative energy plane is quite possibly the most dangerous and inhospitable plane in the entire multiverse. The negative energy plane is one of two energy planes, the other being the positive energy plane. They're less places that you'd want to visit and more just the raw energies of life and death that, together with the elements of the inner planes, make up the matter of the multiverse. While 5th edition seems to imply, based on its Great Wheel map, that positive and negative energy planes sort of encompass the entire multiverse, in 1st and 2nd edition they were strictly considered inner planes, just like the elemental planes. The energy planes don't represent a philosophy or outlook on good and evil the way the outer planes do, and they don't represent an element like the other inner planes. They are simply a matter of life and death, existence versus annihilation. And I'm sure you can guess which one the negative energy plane is. Everything exists. All life and matter in the universe is real and exists. I think most people can agree on that except for maybe a faction or two in Sigil. And it was all created by something, which means there is an equal and opposite force that simply destroys things. And that is what negative energy is. There really aren't any visual descriptions given for the negative energy plane, and that's because there really isn't anything to look at. There's no light, so everything is pitch black, but whereas somewhere like the plane of Earth is dark, but there's still stuff there is nothing on the negative energy plane. All matter here is destroyed within seconds, so there's literally nothing here. It is just an endless void of the darkest black. Travel. So first, how do you get to the negative energy plane? Although I don't really know why you'd want to come here in the first place. Most magic items that allow for planar travel, such as cubic gates, staves of magi, and amulets of the planes, actually have built-in failsafes to prevent them from opening up to either of the energy planes, since they're so dangerous to stumble upon and there's little reason to ever visit them anyways. According to the 2nd edition book Inner Planes, a plane shift spell will work. However, as you might already know, plane shifting requires a tuning fork made from a specific metal and then tuned to a specific note in order to get to the desired plane. And according to issue 120 of Dragon Magazine, there are no known materials for tuning forks that lead to the negative energy plane. So I'm not exactly sure how you would go about plane shifting here, but the Inner Planes book says it does work technically. A door in the city of Sigil could lead here, but few people have need for one, so the information on how to enter it probably wouldn't be widely known or sold. However, the Dustmen must have a way to access the plane since they do have a citadel here. And then of course there's the more straightforward way of simply visiting a neighboring quasi-elemental plane and wandering around until you reach the border of the negative energy plane. Additionally, undead themselves can create gates here. You see, every undead in the multiverse has a tether connecting them to the negative energy plane. These tethers slowly erode away at the fabric of reality until a hole opens up, creating a pathway to the plane of death. Furthermore, powerful undead such as liches, demi-liches, draco-liches, and spellcasting vampires often create temporary or permanent gates to the negative energy plane to allow the energy to flow towards them and their minions, granting them more power. So once you get to this God's Forsaken place, how do you get around? In 1st and 3rd edition, the plane has subjective gravity, meaning you can choose your own down direction and then just fall that way, allowing you to get around that way and then changing your down direction whenever you want to change directions, or just choosing no direction and floating there. According to 3rd edition, flying with wings or any method that relies on air does not function since there's no air here, but magical flight does. In 2nd edition, you instead travel the plane of negative energy through sheer force of will, moving at a speed equal to your movement rate averaged with your wisdom score. Like other inner planes, you can use the border ethereal to move around and avoid the plane's effects, and then just hop back into the plane when you're at your desired location, since you can see the plane from its border ethereal. However, it's much more dangerous here. You see, the two energy planes are so powerful that they weaken the border between them and the ethereal plane. So every 10 minutes spent traveling the border ethereal of this plane, there's a 10% chance that the border pulls back and leaves only the energy plane for the traveler to be stuck in. Properties. Physical properties. So the first physical property we'll talk about is probably the one you're most expecting, and that is annihilation. This plane destroys matter. In first edition, travelers take 2d6 points of damage and 1 level or hit die each round. Meaning if you are a character with levels, you would lose an entire level and go down a level each round, whereas if you were like a monster that didn't have levels, you would instead lose a hit die each round. When their hit points, level, or hit die reach 0, the character is sapped of life and energy, causing them to shrivel and die. In second edition, it's up to the DM to choose if they take 2d6 damage per round or if they are drained 1 level, but you don't take both like you do in first edition. Additionally, if you do the level draining, they do get a save to avoid it each round. Either way, upon reaching 0 HP or level 0, the player is killed and transformed into a random undead, although wraiths and specters are the most common. Additionally, matter conjured here crumbles to nothingness within 1 round. It doesn't say anything about the items on your person being destroyed, it only mentions matter that's conjured here, but it seems odd that if matter conjured here and your body itself is affected, that your inventory wouldn't be, considering 2e did have like inventory destruction rules, and your items do have to make saves while in the positive energy plane, so I'm assuming your items would still have to make saves while in the negative energy plane. It just makes sense to me. Either way, these effects can be prevented via the spell Negative Plane Protection. And if you want 5th edition rules for that spell, I have them on my Patreon. However, as that spell draws on energy from its opposite plane, the positive energy plane, to protect you from the negative energy, it can't actually be cast while on the negative energy plane since those planes don't border each other. So one must cast it before traveling here. In 3rd edition, most of the plane had the major negative dominant trait, which requires a DC 25 fortitude save each round, or you would gain a negative level, dying and becoming a wraith when their negative levels equal their current levels or hit dice. Some parts of the plane were less severe, only dealing 1d6 damage per round and not draining their levels, and then crumbling to ash if you reach 0 HP. In 5th edition, even if your magic allows you to survive here, the experience of facing annihilation will drain your vitality, energy, and happiness. Quote, "The negative plane has all the apathy and despair of Hades and the Shadowfell, combined and concentrated in an infinite expanse of non-being and uncreation." End quote. So while 5th edition doesn't mention anything specific about taking damage or having your matter utterly destroyed, it does have the line, "if your magic allows you to survive here," implying that normally you would die if you entered here without magical protection. It just doesn't give specific rules on that. Okay, the next physical property is breathing. Obviously, there's no air to breathe here. In fact, there's no matter here at all, so spells that transform other matter into breathable air, such as the Airy Earth spell, don't even work. You'll need to bring along your own air supply, or simply remove the need to breathe, such as with a no-breath spell. Senses. The negative energy plane is blacker than anywhere else on the multiverse, so vision is limited to 10 yards in 1st edition and 5 feet in 3rd edition. In 1st and 2nd edition, sources of light, including magical light, are consumed almost instantly, while in 3rd edition they are instead drained of color but still emit gray light. I couldn't find anything on how infravision or dark vision works, but since a plane of nothingness probably doesn't have any heat, I assume it doesn't work either. Sound barely travels here, and even your sense of touch is numbed in the life-draining energy of the plane. Mechanically, this means that hearing and touch work half as well. Magical properties. Okay, so in 1st edition, any matter created by a spell collapses into dust after 1 round. Summoning spells function, but any creatures of average intelligence know that they are being summoned here, so they can either refuse or take protective measures. Damaging spells deal minimum damage, and spells that deal damage over time function only for 1 round, as the energy of the plane negates them. In 2nd edition, air, fire, and wild magic are diminished, meaning they function as if the caster is one level lower and spells above 4th level cannot function, and then earth, water, and necromancy spells are enhanced, meaning that they function as if the caster is one level higher and saving throws against it have a -1. Spells that cause damage always deal the maximum amount of damage, and spells that heal always heal the minimum amount. No spell keys are known to get around this. One thing worth mentioning is that in Planescape, all of these magical properties are only for arcane spellcasters like wizards. Divine spellcasters who get their magic from gods like clerics and druids aren't affected by these. Instead, they are treated as one level lower for each plane between the plane they're on and the plane their god resides in. In 3rd edition, spells that use negative energy are maximized, dealing max damage, affecting the maximum number of targets, etc., and spells that use positive energy, such as healing spells, are impeded, meaning they must make a successful spellcraft check or the spell fails, and then they suffer a -10 penalty to fortitude saves made to regain levels lost through energy drain. Encounters. Encountering something in a plane of emptiness is rather rare, but in addition to undead sightings, there are a few things of note. The first are elemental pockets. Just like all inner planes, pockets of other elements can make their way here. However, they are swiftly destroyed by the, matter annihilating aspect of negative energy, so you'll probably never actually run into one as they don't last very long. Voidstone. In some places of the plane, the negative energy is so concentrated it collapses into itself and stabilizes into a solid chunk of negative energy. These void stones resemble pitch black rocks. If you've ever seen Vanta Black, it's like a black paint that absorbs like 99.9% of all light or something. I picture that. Anything that comes into contact with it is destroyed, although you are allowed a saving throw, and it is theorized these are used to craft spheres of annihilation. Although, unlike those, void stones cannot be controlled by mental energy. Even the natives of the negative energy plane can be destroyed by these. Inhabitants. The negative energy plane has no true elementals, but there are a few creatures that live here, although it's unlikely that they are true natives that originated here, given the plane's hard stance against creating life or matter. Okay, so first let's talk about the natives. I know you can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes when I say natives, but you know what I mean. Things that are mostly only found here and seem to thrive in the negative energy. The first are the Zag-Yi. These are as close to a negative energy elemental as you're going to get, and they are the negative counterpart of the Zag-Ya found on the positive energy plane. They roam the plane for no perceivable purpose, as they are relatively mindless beings. However, some posit their alien nature just makes it impossible to communicate meaningfully, and so while they might have a purpose, we just can't understand it. Zag-Yi attack anything on sight, perhaps out of curiosity as opposed to malice, but once again nobody knows. No one knows where they came from or what they do, but like I said earlier, it's probably likely that they didn't originate here and simply just found it and decided to live here. Despite this, you can occasionally convince one to act as a guide on a roll of an 8 or higher on a 2d6. The next native are Trillocs. These creatures originated on a demiplane that consisted mostly of negative energy, as they were already used to and resistant to the stuff. That demiplane drifted too close to the negative plane's border ethereal and was consumed, so now they live here. They have no definitive form, instead existing as amorphous ripples of negative energy, and even this was only seen by a detect magic spell, as they were invisible and incorporeal, at least in 1st and 2nd edition. In 3rd edition, they actually did have a true form. Most people just didn't think they did, since the only way to see it is by using a true sight spell or other powerful divination magic. And their true form was 3 feet long and had the characteristics of crustaceans, crinoids, and fungus all in one. Trillocs are beings of pure energy that feed on the life force of dying creatures, the process of which they help accelerate. They tend to stick to large monsters they can feed off of, since they emit large amounts of life force. If their victim is slain, they then move on to the victor. Most spells have no effect on them, save for a few. True Sight reveals their true form, Detect Magic shows their aura, Dispel Magic drives them away, and Cure Wounds hurts them. Nightshades. Nightshades are jet black creatures that wish to spread death and destruction everywhere they go, attacking anything they see. They exude an aura of cold within a 60-foot radius, which spoils all food and other consumable items as they become too desiccated to be useful. Their touch is poisonous, with a failed saving throw resulting in instant death. They can also cast a few spells and have a 75% chance to summon a random undead once every 4 hours. They can only be harmed by +3 weapons or spells of 6th level or higher. They can enter the ethereal plane at will, but can only enter the prime if summoned by a spellcaster, in which case they gain the caster's memories, making them very intelligent and better at performing tasks for them. Despite the fact that they are beings of negative energy that love destruction, they for some reason hoard treasure by swallowing it, usually collecting jewelry and art objects inside themselves. Because it isn't Dungeons and Dragons unless the monsters have treasure to loot, even if the monster is the physical embodiment of annihilation and the opposite of matter, but whatever. There are also a few variants of nightshades. Night crawlers are 100-foot long worms which swallow their prey. Night walkers are 20-foot tall humanoids that crush shields, weapons, and magical items upon each attack and curse people with its gaze. Although in 5th edition they can't destroy items, but they do emit an annihilating aura which deals necrotic damage. And anyone they reduce to 0 HP dies and cannot be revived as they eat their soul. And night wings, which are giant bats with a 50-foot wingspan that polymorph anyone they touch into a bat and weaken shields and weapons. These are all technically types of nightshades, so I assume they're all still jet black and made out of darkness. Umbral blots, also called black balls or assassins of the elder gods, looked exactly like spheres of annihilation. 5 feet diameter spheres of absolute void that destroyed anything they touched. However, these were sentient and would move towards any living creature within 60 feet and consume them. Some believe that umbral blots only knew a lost language of the old gods, and thus had no one to communicate with. Sages speculate that they were created by these elder gods, called the Old Ones, as messengers and assassins, but they annihilated their creators. Given that they are presumably made out of the same nothingness that spheres of annihilation are, they were almost impossible to fight or kill, as basically nothing harmed them. Known ways of dealing with them is a carefully worded wish spell. A gate spell would compel it to go through it, a rod of cancellation would immobilize it for 1 minute while destroying the rod, and then coming into contact with a sphere of annihilation would transport it to another plane of existence while disintegrating everything within 200 feet. So other than the native creatures I just mentioned, the other main thing you'll find here are undead. Undead thrive off the negative energies of the plane, as negative energy is how they were animated in the first place. Incorporeal undead like wraiths and specters are the most common, and lesser undead like skeletons and zombies are actually overwhelmed by the abundance of energy and explode, similar to how living beings react on the positive energy plane. Powerful undead such as vampires and liches can be found here, either visiting the plane for research or inside a magical fortress. All undead that come across a living creature will immediately attack the interloper as they view them as an abomination. Oddly enough, 1st edition says that there are no records of undead being spotted on the negative energy plane, despite them drawing their animating force from it, with some scholars even speculating that undead exists on the prime material and the negative energy plane simultaneously. Besides the natives and undead, the other things you can find here are beings shaped from negative energy that people believe to be negative energy elementals or fundamentals, but truthfully they're neither. They're more akin to golems created by a powerful spellcaster with limited mental capabilities. Gods. Even gods of death and destruction are afraid of this place, but some of them do occasionally come here to renew their link with its forces of destruction. Only a few gods call the negative energy plane their home. The first is Siva, the force of destruction incarnate in the Vedic pantheon. Siva is not viewed as evil by his pantheon, but simply an avatar of ultimate annihilation, whose goal is to destroy the multiverse in order to achieve a world of perfect nothingness. While the Vedic religion isn't technically still worshipped anymore in real life, it is an ancient predecessor to Hinduism, and Siva is just Shiva who is still worshipped today. It's normally seen as bad taste to put gods still presently worshipped by a billion people in your fantasy D&D setting, but it was the 90s, I guess? He occasionally protects the multiverse from acts to change it, preserving the way it currently exists, as any extreme changes could thwart his plans. Otherwise, he spends his time meditating on how to accomplish his goals in his divine realm known as the Vortex. The Vortex destroys anything that enters, so no descriptions of it exist. The only other god that I could find that dwells here is Null, the draconic god of death, but he only sort of lives here? It's confusing. So Null has two domains, the Mausoleum of Chronepsis in the Outlands and the Mausoleum of Pain in Carcery, reflecting his two aspects, Chronepsis and Falliger. However, the second edition book Cult of the Dragon says that his mausoleums also existed in both the negative energy plane and the demi-plane of shadows simultaneously. The demi-plane of shadows being the Shadowfell before it became the Shadowfell. And that both mausoleums may actually be a single structure that exists in all four at the same time. Ed Greenwood expands on this, saying that his realm exists in Carcery in the spot where it touches the Outlands and overlaps with the negative energy plane and plane of shadow. Point being, it only partially exists on this plane, so he's not like completely here, if that makes sense. Since it's only slightly on this plane, I'm not really going to talk about it in the location section of this video, but I felt like Null was worth mentioning. Speaking of the location section of this video, locations. The first location on the negative energy plane is Death Heart. Once called the Heart of the Void, it is a 1-mile diameter metal sphere with an entire city inside. It came in from a long-dead world on the material plane, designed to be a colony in the negative energy plane, a palace untainted by outside influence and schools of thought. However, it was eventually overrun by undead who ate everybody inside. Now, an evil location populated only by undead, it is called Death Heart. The plane's energy does not reach inside the sphere, making it theoretically safe, but no one is brave enough to go in and explore since, there's all that undead there. The various undead factions inside are usually stuck in perpetual war with each other, but recently, a vampiric minotaur has established peace in order to research the city and the plane itself, with the eventual goal of moving Death Heart to another plane to wreak havoc there. One thing that isn't mentioned in the books that I just thought of is that to make undead, you obviously need something once living. Normally, you can't reanimate a corpse that was already an undead that was killed. Since they're isolated in this sphere, they don't have a way of replenishing their numbers, and they had to have lost many undead in their constant war. So I could see this vampiric minotaur wanting to move it outside the plane in order to restock on corpses to replenish their undead numbers. The next location is the Fortress of the Soul, a citadel maintained by the Dustmen, the faction in Sigil who believe everyone is already dead, and the only way to achieve true death is to purge yourself from all passions and sense of self. The Fortress of the Soul is a place of quiet contemplation for the Dustmen, usually around 50 or so, and there is little inside except for ascetic accommodations. The Dustmen here are helpful to people in need of shelter, but they don't let them stay long, instead sending them through a portal to Sigil, which opens once a week in the place that used to be the Hall of Speakers. The Dustmen also have a place here called the Court of Woe, a mammoth hall built of calcified husks of all manner of beings. Whenever the Fraternity of Orders courts in the city of Sigil get full, they send the overflow petty criminals to the Court of Woe, to be judged by a Nalfejni demon named Gabberslug, who either sentences them to service or, if they're truly deserving of punishment, drains them of energy, feeding off their fear, hatred, and other negative emotions, leaving them as empty husks for several weeks. Castles Perilous. The same way good-aligned creatures will lock away wretched artifacts and imprison powerful evil beings to prevent further evil, evil-aligned creatures will keep good-aligned artifacts and heroes imprisoned in towers of pitted iron and sealed gates within the negative energy plane. These prisons are collectively referred to as Castles Perilous, which has absolutely no relation to the location in the Forgotten Realms in Vasa called Castle Perilous. They just confusingly gave it the same name for some reason. Other. In addition to these named locations, there are also quite a few fortresses and other bases of powerful wizards, usually undead ones like Vecna or Asirak, as wizards who become undead have a tendency of obsessing over the negative energy plane. One thing I find odd is that 2nd edition doesn't explain how these structures exist here. I mean, the negative energy plane is said to destroy all matter, and yet there's multiple citadels and an entire city in a giant metal ball that exists here just perfectly fine. Now, 3rd edition does explain it, stating that certain areas of the plane, called doldrums, are less intense and do not have the normal matter-destroying properties of the rest of the plane, so structures or settlements are built in these doldrums. It seems kind of odd to me that a plane of pure annihilation just has sections where it doesn't do that for some reason, so it's not a super satisfying answer to me personally, but at least 3rd edition does explain it. 2nd edition just ignores this question, which I find odd since 2nd edition is usually really good at giving tons of detail that answers all my questions, but if I had to guess, it's some combination of the negative plane protection spell mixed with the permanency spell just cast a bunch of times, or maybe a special version of the negative plane protection spell that's just bigger and encompasses a larger area, and then you cast permanency on it to make it permanent, but I'm just kind of spitballing magical research ideas. Anyways, that is everything I could find on the negative energy plane. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and remember to subscribe for more D&D related content.